by Sue Minahan.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for soul growth. Come journey with us through astrology's energetic cycles and get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, everybody. Aloha. I'm Sue Minahan, and this is Talk Cosmos. And today is November 10th. We're in the autumn season, and we're actually addressing the fact that in November, many planets, 7 actually, are, well, 6 for sure, are at 0 degrees. They'll be ingressing along the line. And that's like a sprouting of new consciousness, a new paradigm, which we all know is really occurring. And it's so fascinating to see the cosmos reflect that into our inner lives. And we do this back and forth. And that's what Planet Buzz is all about. So we are now ready for Planet Buzz.
Focusing on perspectives of pattern planet cycle relationships and understanding their archetypal energy consciousness, reflecting through history, current events, mythology, and philosophical questions, these are the members of Planet Buzz.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, founder of Talk Cosmos since 2018. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, consultant, speaker, writer, vibrational astrology student, Dwarf Planet University graduate, Kepler Astrology Toastmasters Club charter member. I have a fine arts music degree plus a certificate in jazz. I'm an artist, musician, and certified color energy life coach. Especially, I love mythology and esoteric philosophies.
And I'm Dr. Laura Tad. I work as a spiritually oriented psychological astrologer with students and clients around the world. As a counselor, writer, and educator, I love helping people recognize their inner strengths, take advantage of auspicious moments, and navigate times of challenge with greater ease. On my own podcast, Mythic Sky Storytime, I discuss astrology, mythology, and actualizing our full potential. Learn more at mythicsky.com.
Plus, a special guest who we will introduce in just a short moment.
And as the ancient Hermetic code reveals,
as below, so above. As above, so below.
Hi, Laura, Dr. Tad.
Hi.
It's wonderful. It's always what a journey we're going on these days.
Yes. Yeah. It's been a year of change for sure, and it's continuing.
Indeed. It's fascinating to realize that we have seed potential within that. It's always a cycle with astrology. Well, let's get to our guest, who I think people will be familiar with, John Chinworth. Hello, John. Yes, John's on various ones of these panels, and I know the two of you, we all go back to Seattle, so this is a real treat to get back together. John is a consultant, a conference lecturer, a writer, a poet, and he has a diploma with the International Academy of Astrology, that's the IAA, in 2021. And he has more than 2 decades, 25 years at least, of experience, and he continues to enhance that consulting techniques by attending, of course, as we do, but particularly with conferences and workshops. His website is skypathastro.com, and his email, archerstars@gmail.com, which we'll have on slides. Now, he's lectured at NORWAC, big conference, and San Francisco Astrology Society, and he too is obsessed with mythology, as the two of us are, so it's a good fit. And he's in fact branded that Greco-Roman pantheon into his psyche when he was a kid, so we talk and live this way. And on a local basis in Seattle, he was a past board member of WASA, which perhaps many of you in that locality, because we do go through KKNW besides Facebook and podcasts, might be members of. So look into that. And he teaches and mentors developmentally disabled and resource children for many years and writes poetry, travels.
Well, thank
you. You're welcome.
That was a good bio.
Yes, indeed. I know when to stop. And I forgot the small j, big J. But let's go on. Here we have John's at skypathastro.com and Dr. Tad at mythicsky.com, which you'll want to know because she has a retreat coming up, and myself at Talk Cosmos. Immediately, this is the map, the universe map. And we've shown systematically when they ingress, starting from the November 2nd with Mercury. And this is important because Mercury and Mars are going to retrograde. So they have shadow paths. And then on the same day, the next day, both Mars and Juno. Juno goes first and then Mars. And then there's a gap with Venus, and then a little more of a gap with Pluto. And right after that, which we've been waiting for a long time, right? And then the sun. So
yes, lots of domino of ingresses going on.
It is. It's like a potpourri, a little petri dish but they're all different. Most of them are different plants, except for the sun and Mercury.
Yeah.
It's this shift, right? I mean, we're all done with these signs, and when like 6 or more planets, like we're done here, and they all jump a new sign, it's like a shift.
Yeah, and in like plateaus, little spurts, it's got its own rhythm too. It's like boom,
Definitely.
Boom. If we put sound effects, I'm always with sound effects.
We need those.
So we're going to include the dwarf planets. Pluto is a dwarf planet. We embrace it every which way. But along with that, Sedna, which is the outermost in the Kuiper belt, past Neptune, and Pluto, because they're all past Neptune, trans-Neptunian, is that it is a soul's path destiny. And that's all you need to know. It's like a big backdrop that's changed from perhaps Earth in Taurus of earthbound nature and survival to this communication network that we're translating somehow. And then Haumea, these cycles is a long one. And so she is a planet of rebirth, a creation goddess, really. So when you put all this together, we are transforming, rebirthing. It's a big play. And of course, Juno is in the asteroid belt, and she's about our alliances. This is just a little bit of information for people about them that if you want to go into, you can always go back to these slides when you review it. And for those people that are listening later. So unless you have comments, we'll go on to the Sabian symbols that is part of this dialogue.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's interesting to look at the metaphorical descriptions, right, of all of this shift that's happening. And
It does.
like so much of the story changing almost simultaneously.
Yes. And a lot of it is encouraging us to, just as you say, embrace that side of us that is on the spiritual, that is intuitive, that isn't exactly laid out in a little diagram for us. So this was in 1925 with the spiritualist medium Elsie Wheeler and the astrologer Mark Edmund Jones. And it is for each sign of all 12, all three, through the 360 degrees, but it rounds it up to the next one. So it actually goes from from 1 to 30. It's a little different technique, but okay.
Well, because there's minutes and seconds, right? So as soon as you're 1 second into any degree, you're past that degree.
Yes.
Right.
So that's
Exactly.
why you always go to the following.
And this is just showing the spread of archetypes, that the Sedna is the one that went in April 27th into Gemini, and she's still at 0 degrees, but it will be the 1 degree Gemini, and Mars
And
in
she'll be there
Leo.
for a long time because her orbit is 10,000 years or some huge
Well,
number.
the orbit is 11,400, but in
Thank
this
you.
sign, it's very compact because it's so elliptical. It's
Oh, right.
44 years, 46, compared to Sagittarius, it's like 1,500 years. I mean, and Taurus 2 was 56 years, whereas in Scorpio it was like 1,500, and that was during the Egyptian time. So we're going, because the whole orbit goes back to and I'll finish with this. It goes back to when we had the Neolithic
Right.
and the Ice Age, and the people started migrating with agriculture. And the closest point it's going to come to is not that far away. It's in Cancer. It's going to be in 2076. So all this is kind of mind-boggling as we go forward, but it's fascinating to keep in tune and check. Little aside. Should we look at Mercury? That's the first one.
Sure. That
Sure.
yeah, he ingressed, a couple of weeks ago,
Yes, that's right. On the
or a week
second,
ago.
it was 0 Sag. Sag, retired Army veterans gather to reawaken old memories. So it's
I think of loyalty and companionship and devotion with that degree. Yeah. Thinking
Yeah,
of community and
Yeah. There's I sort of brings up the imagery to me of like sitting around the campfire and
Yeah.
talking about old stories, talking about the past.
remember when,
the
right?
good old
Remembering
times.
best times. And for me, for these modern times, what are the things from the best of times in the past we can remember and carry forward? Maybe that's a really important message right now.
It is. It is. I think it seems to be both past and future, which is how we all continue. So we're thinking lots on this. Here's the chart, and we folks have compared all these charts to the United States Sibley chart, which is at July 4th, 1776 at 5 p.m. Philadelphia, which was the capital at that time. And then the new chart would be located at Washington, that you'll see at the top. The format's going to be the same on all these slides. And here we have any bullet points before the bi-wheel is about that outside chart with the transit chart. So we'll discuss as we can, and then again, if we haven't covered it all, which is not necessarily our intent, because we have quite a bit between now and the first breakaway, you can go back and figure things out. So there
Well,
she is. Mhm.
Mercury's in the 12th house. Our favorite house of all time.
Yeah, and in a grand square, I mean, Mercury is really predominant. Like we were saying, it's really talking it up. What was that Sabian symbol? Because there's a trine in fire. Fire just feeds off itself. It wants to keep going. It wants to keep working on its memories in the future. It's just incredible.
Well, and it speaks to the Sabian symbol in some ways too, of being in the 12th, of like that. The unconscious, the past. What have we forgotten that we need to give voice to again? Right. And that being part of this, the ideals, the philosophies, all of that saggy intellectual philosophy, right?
Mhm.
That like, what do we need to remember from the past in term and re-envision, because it's also the 12th house, which can be very imaginative. So how do we reimagine the ideas of the past into something new?
A big stewing pot, like all the dreams of humanity, what's going to come out of this. And we're looking at all of that. And of course, what is the best of that? The moon makes it, well, it isn't another sign, but it still makes it kind of emotional being there in
Deeply
Scorpio.
so. What we
there could
care
be-
about, our
right.
alliances, our people that we
So
were
people can be
with.
reactive
Yeah, it's
to
deep.
what they're seeing or dealing with. So
And all during
there.
this time, we have Mars that's quite activated because Jupiter is making those actions are innately, like how we directed ourselves as a natal consciousness, important. And then we know that Mars is going to go retrograde. We have a lot of different aspects happening. Let's look at the next and see, because as we know, I'll stop myself here, that Mars opposite Pluto is evident here. And for the next several days, a big player. And that's action with transformation, and it's with Juno of alliances, our marriages. So I was thinking of the moon in Scorpio, of course it's very much, and it's ruled by both those signs, traditionally with Mars, but modern, which we all go along with too, with Pluto. So we're really regenerating, hopefully, ideas, or else.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got a bunch of different charts that have some similarities. So maybe look at some
Okay.
of those. We don't
Let's look
talk
at
too
Juno.
much about just-
Okay.
yeah.
Here's Juno. She's sitting between Mars and Jupiter in the asteroid belt. And she is representing our marriage and our alliances and our new terms. Like, what are we really partnered with? And this one Scorpion is a crowded sightseeing bus on a city street, fundamental human eagerness to expand our social horizons and experience what those achievements and ways of life happen. So it's widening.
In that image for that Sabian symbol, it's a dilapidated city street in the original wording. So these tourists are going through a part of town that's kind of fallen apart. So there's a hint of disintegration, decay, and breaking down. And you have these people on the outside looking at that.
Interesting. Because really we're having a Chiron return, which next week Talk Cosmos is going to talk about. You're on that, John, also with U.S. Global Currents. And we're so close to it. You know, in fact, it happened on the 8th. So we're today's the 10th. It just happened 2 days ago. So we're all in this period of time. Our wounds.
Well, and that idea, you can pull up the chart, but of that John spoke to, that it's a dilapidated, it's a city sort of in ruins that this protected group of people in a bus are observing, right? That also speaks to this us and them potentially, or this like it's not my, I see the devastation or what's the scorpionic energy of falling apart or decomposing that's visual, but it's not, it's not affecting me. I'm just, am I bearing witness, or am I really glad that it's not me? And we get some free will, I think, in the attitude we take, right? You could have either perspective of bearing witness to somebody's suffering so that you then take action, or on the other side, be like, well, it's not my problem.
It's so objective, right?
Just in her innateness, Juno calls for the sense of doing what's right. So I'm glad it's that planet. And she's also with Haumea.
Yeah.
Yes, rebirth.
Really quite lovely.
And it's in the 11th house. That really supports this idea of the objectivity and the detachment, not because they don't care, but because then they can get, as you say there so clearly and beautifully, an idea of seeing the big picture too. Because if, along with Mercury and Jupiter being in mutual reception, it's all combined there. I really thank you for that objectivity and seeing the composting, because there isn't any new seeds unless there's composting. There needs dirt to have it breed. Well, Mars is later that day. This is at in the morning in the East Coast at 3 a.m. That's 3:34 and 59, almost 3:35 a.m. on the East Coast. So the next planet just later that day will be Mars, also ingressing from
Cancer into Leo. Yeah.
Yes. And it's so important because it does its retrograde later at 6 degrees and goes back to Cancer. And we really don't get out of all of this until I think May 2nd. It's a long, long time from September or October. It's from October to May.
Yeah, I mean, and really that opposition that we've been in with Pluto, even if it gets out of, it never really gets out of orb because they're both moving, right? So Pluto, which will ingress later in the month, right? It's like, oh, well, now they're opposing in Aquarius and Leo, where we just had the last ever Pluto opposed Mars in Capricorn Cancer that any of us will experience in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Even though Pluto will oppose, or Mars will oppose Pluto 2 more times in the next 6 months.
But this one's in Capricorn, right? Yeah. So it's quite different.
Well, the one
looking
we
at
just experienced
transformation.
was in Capricorn, yeah, and then the
Well, I'm
ingress.
saying on the 3rd, as of even today, the 8th, Pluto's still in Capricorn. It won't change until the 19th. So we're still embraced or ensconced in the end of, yes, as you say, Pluto and Capricorn. So this says blood rushes to a man's head as vital energies are mobilized under the spur of ambition. So it says, but it's biopsychic energies of
Hyper
consciousness.
awareness,
Yeah. So this is really
extreme
motivating.
intelligence, being really aware of what's going on or trying to be, which is, I don't know, with Mars. What do we think about that?
Fire. Yeah. Fire and igniting. It's really the heart
Yeah.
of the flame. We need to have manifestation because otherwise we don't know where we're going from. And it's
Mhm.
all that work.
Wow,
It's
yeah.
very important, I think. Let's look at the chart so we can go through these. This was on the 3rd at the evening, almost at the end of the day. So the first was in the morning at 3 o'clock, and this is at 11 o'clock Eastern time. And approximately. And so we have transiting Mars here. And things have very little changed. The only thing that's really changed is the fact that the moon has gone from 1 degree to 11 degrees. So it's right on our ascendant. Just before it's like moving right on our ascendant, that's the public, and that's so emotional. And it's also, as we know with the election, a big tide across the United States, although the cities are quite compressed with a big population, that you spread that out all across the United States, and a lot of voices rose to the occasion. I think that has a lot to do with it because Mars is in Leo. It was like, I can do something. It's not just wait and see, because in Cancer, it's so security minded. It's a very different.
Well, and there's an indirectness to Cancer, right? Is often how I describe it to clients as a Cancer, right? I feel comfortable. It's not derogatory. It's like, it's the crab. Crabs walk sideways.
Yeah.
That's literally how they navigate the world. And when Mars is in Cancer, there is this sort of coming at things in an angle as opposed to directly.
True.
And so that ingress into Leo, it's much more direct. It's not sidestepping. It's not trying to dance around things. It's being very direct, and there's a precision in that.
And really, I'm just, you're inspiring me to realize the necessity of the Cancer attitude, because you get prepared, right? I mean, you learn, what am I really thinking and feeling, so that you're ready in Leo to do just what you said.
Or it could be more like recon in Cancer, and then in Leo you take the action.
I wonder how Mars feels about Pluto being in Mars's sign of exaltation.
Well, I think
Mars likes being in Capricorn, and it's over in Cancer going, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, let's look at one point and then move on, because we have a few minutes here. It's in a month, on December 6th, that Mars is going to retrograde at 6 degrees, 10 minutes Leo. And that's only half a degree, 29 minutes from our US North Node. So because of timing, it could be exactly on it, which is really activating the whole nation again. Oh, I think we were going to mention about in 2025.
So that's the chart, right?
Yeah, this will be in January 6th, which is, as we know, the day that I think the United States declares.
No, that's January 6th was the storming of the Capitol.
I know, but every January 6th, there's like a message from the
vote
president.
gets ratified.
Yeah, right. That's all. But it happens to be the second time that Mars retrogrades, and it'll be, it was retrograde and now it's direct, and it's at 0 degrees Leo.
Or is that when it gets back to 0? Is that?
Yes, it gets back to 0.
But it's retrograde.
Oh, but
it
it's
hasn't gone
retrograde.
direct
Thank
yet.
you. That's right.
It's the retrograde
in
It's the
it has
retrograde
been
0 degree.
that's right. It's been retrograde, but now it's back at that 0 point. Thank you. And since we're
Yeah.
talking about 0 points, okay.
And now both signs are in both planets are now in signs that are actually opposite each other. So the dynamic is much more strong. So you got the Leo Aquarius thing going on, which to me is the axis of participation. How do you want to be involved? Leo, do you want to be on stage? Aquarius, do you want to be the audience or
Network. Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Beautiful.
which is
And
an
with our
interesting dynamic.
alliances. So we're going to go to Venus, and we have Pluto, and we have quite a few to do in 2 minutes. I don't think we'll make it. Venus is 1 Capricorn, power and responsibility. Now, this is days after. This is the 11th. It hasn't happened. It's going to be in tomorrow. Yeah. And it's a power and responsibility implied in any claim for leadership. So it's
Very
about authority.
Capricornian.
John, you want to give us your ideas?
So the original is I lost it. A chief gains power over the assembled tribe, empowerment, capability, ferocity. I put animals with the Sabian symbols. So to me, that's the tiger who has a whole lot of command. So it's a mighty symbol for the beginning of Capricorn.
Okay, so
It-
let's
it
look at
says
this chart.
establishment.
And here we have, again, on the inside is the United States chart and the outside. And you can see here with the arrow that on the transit chart, Venus is going to be in our first house. We're going to be caring about these old traditions, and we're going to be caring about what is essential and how to get there. And it's at the very beginning. So it's going to be, if it's a tiger in your thinking, it's going to speak. And it's in a grand cardinal squares. And it's actually opposite natal Venus. So we're aware of what we originally thought, and we're coming across with a lot of, is this right? Is it wrong? What do we think about it?
It's
Feel
our
about
expression
it.
to the world is the first house in a mundane chart. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So having
And it's square the nose.
maybe it's asking us to put love forward in a very strong way at this time
Yeah.
as a collective.
Because there's a piece about Capricorn, right? That's about accountability. And so like
Sure.
stand up for what you believe in. If you espouse certain values, you better stand your ground.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe part
absolute.
of this is
Good.
the grounding of values. They're not
And-
amorphous. They're not just philosophical like Venus and Sag, that it's like, well, we can talk about interesting philosophical values for hours.
Yeah.
But actually doing something concrete, how are you going to concretize what you believe in, what you hold to be valuable?
So you're being asked to do homework and studying and preparing and
Yeah.
doing Capricorn.
Well, let's go to and to the sun now, because the sun, this will be on the 11th, which is tomorrow. Then it'll be a week later that the sun ingresses Sagittarius, which is also part of it. So we've been dealing with Scorpio right now, and then we will move into a retired Army veterans gather to reawaken old memories. Again, the same as we did with Mercury. So now we're not just thinking about it, but our ego, our consciousness of wholeness, because everything goes through the sun, is going to come up with that. Let's see what happens. The sun is, again, of course, in the 12th house, because it's the same at the beginning, but it's going to move later on into the first house. And it's in a yod. It's in a yod with Saturn in the third.
So with...
Are we talking Jupiter Chiron?
I'm not sure.
So the yod, so to Saturn in the... I'm not sure where you see that.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Yod. How did I get? Let's skip that. I am sorry, folks. I wish I could change it. Moon in the 8th. No, that isn't even here. This is something different. That's totally. Oh, you know what? Yeah, that could have been Mercury when it was in. We're wasting time. I'm really.
So yeah. So, but I think so looking at and then seeing like how is the sun at this same point different than Mercury, where so it's not giving language to, it's not speaking It's not giving language to these old stories. It's identifying with them. Maybe it's embodying them. It's
And this is
what is my role? What was my role? What was my part? Where am I
Yeah.
accountable or not?
And it's opposite Sedna. Again, it's like our soul path destiny. It's going to be a little hard to understand because these outer planets don't speak just so directly. It sets up a whole backdrop. And Sedna really wants us to have our actual soul path destiny. So it sets up things that we finally just are forced to let go of old, outdated consciousness from other people into our true sense of destiny. So we'll wait and see. Okay. We made it. We can come back. We will return. Thank you, everybody. I have Dr. Laura Tad and John Chinworth, and this is Planet Buzz about your beginning seeds. And come right back. We're going to finish up with some others. See ya. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the yin period of Scorpio, traditionally ruled by Mars, now ruled by Pluto. By departing a cycle based on comparison between extreme energies finding balance, Scorpio commits a relationship to exchange resources, experiencing power and powerlessness for the purpose of soul growth transformation. As a fixed water sign that is extreme, intense, and secretively deep, Scorpio's passionate nature questions the psychology and mystery concerning life and death.
This is Martha Norwalk. Every Sunday morning, beginning at 9 a.m., thanks in part to the Ananda Institute of Living Yoga, we cover the world of animals. This week, November 17th, it's Behavior Training and Healing Sunday with me and talk with your human or animal loved ones on this side or the other, personal awareness coaching and readings with Natasha Venter. Hope you can join us. Plan to call in with your questions for either one of us or a personal reading with Natasha. Martha Norwalk's Animal World, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to noon, right here on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Talk Cosmos brings insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for the soul growth with hour-long programs every Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific on KKNW. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel and Facebook page. While you're there, make sure you click the like and subscribe buttons so you get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. And to find out about upcoming programs, sign up for the newsletter at talkcosmos.com. So grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
Wondering what's on next on Alternative Talk 1150? Check out 1150kknw.com.
Hi, we are back again, and thank you, everybody. This is Planet Buzz with 0 Degrees Planet Seeding Consciousness. John Chinworth is at skypathastro.com, a consultant and lecturer, does workshops. You can contact Dr. Laura Tad, is at mythicsky.com, and she's going to tell you about a retreat. And she also does consultations, and as I do also. So let's listen to you, Laura.
Yeah. So, I have a couple things coming up, but the big one is the third year that I've helped out with the Goddess Awakening Retreat in Playa El Coco in Nicaragua. And myself and a dear friend of mine I've known since I was 19 are running a retreat on the sacred feminine, and there'll be yoga every morning and astrology and meditation and various different healing opportunities to go ziplining in the jungle or ride horses on the beach. And it's right by a turtle sanctuary. It's why I've got a little picture of a baby turtle. So you get to, at least once while folks are there, there'll be a release of baby turtles into the sea. And it's a pretty magical healing spot. And we've got some spaces available. And so it's,
and it's right.
Check out more on my website. It's right on the beach on the Pacific coast of Nicaragua, about 12 kilometers from the Costa Rican border. So you can see Costa Rica from the beach. It's right there.
Looks absolutely marvelous. So just go to mythicsky.com. It's under events, and you can
Yep.
find out information and register. I do a few ongoing videos with Liz Mouchette's YouTube program. She calls it the Astrology Star Sisters that I'm on, and we will continue with our dwarf planets. We're both graduates of Alan Clay's class, and it's an exciting way to look at what's happening. For Talk Cosmos, our last, that's very pertinent ones, just to check out, just to notify, to bring to your attention, was the last one with Planet Buzz at Pluto's last gasping Capricorn, which we're still experiencing. And the one on archetypal symbols talking about the new moon that is through this whole period of time that we're still engaged in. We're actually at the first quarter. And the one that John is on, Kaleidoscope Visions, and that would be about the lunar phases. That also addresses the, oh, I have October there. Darn it. We did one on November. Well, life isn't perfect, but there is one for November. Next week is going to be U.S. global currents. We're going to look at the Chiron retrograde. It's the second return. This is a program that was initiated from the 21st when we had our first Chiron return, and it's so strong. That happened to be when Jupiter and Uranus were conjunct. So there's many big changes as we've experienced, and now as we see, this is actually happened a couple of days ago, but we're going to address how the country is reopening wounds and our whole process. It's retrograde. So come join us for that. And thank you, everybody, for your support. Talk Cosmos, we're going to talk about Pluto. That's ingressing into Aquarius on the 19th, the 5th time since March 2023.
Or hitting that 0 point, not the 5th time it's ingressed. But
well, 5th time ingressed in Aquarius is my point. It was at the 0 point these 5 times. It was on,
and now it's there to stay.
Yes, and it's here to stay. So it's gone back 5 times, as you know, is strong. Usually it's 3 times, but here we're at a double.
When it was in Sag, it hit my ascendant 5 times, so it happens.
Yes, I know. I'm talking to the choir here. Indeed. And the interesting part is this 5th time, the sun will have been, as we just noticed, in Sagittarius. So there's many changes now with this final ingress than the past ones. So let's look at that 0 degrees Aquarius. I know that we've looked at it before, perhaps, but it's an old Adobe mission. And that it's revealing unconscious energies that have been deeply submerged, you know.
I think of strength and durability and faith. I mean, a mission, they seem to stand forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, endurance. That's
and
right.
I love this degree for the beginning of Aquarius with Pluto there, and we are an Aquarian nation. This might be kind of good, just to kick off and maybe to remember what we stand for.
The moon is in, and the south node, as we understand, because Mars, not in next month on the 6th, is going to be exactly on our north node, opposing that Aquarian south node. You know, of where we came from trauma, from evolutionary standpoint, evolutionary astrology, and also networking and the genius, the innovation,
well, and it also there may be some reckoning that needs to happen around this. I mean, I think of California missions, and I think of the stories I know of how they were built.
That's very true.
Horrific.
Good point.
yes,
Right. And
indeed.
so there is the reckoning that potentially is needed in terms of from a collective perspective.
Yeah.
And
what
the idea of tribe,
right.
The idea of community, and what is good for the whole, right?
And taking over from yes, from other peoples,
At
and
what
the
cost have
identity.
we built our institutions, and how many people have suffered because of it, and to own up to that
Yeah.
across the board.
And that coming to light, that being revealed,
Mhm.
stuff, Pluto digging deep, right? And maybe illuminating in some like the things that we've tried. I mean, that's why I don't think of Pluto as a dwarf planet. I think culturally we wanted to shrink him and put him away because we don't like talking about difficult things. We're not comfortable talking about death. So let's put Pluto over here and not talk about him. Right.
But
And
no,
yet there's
Laura, I have to.
unearthing that
I think
what
that here I'm really interrupting, I guess, and because I've studied the dwarf planets.
but
my whole
but most people don't talk about them. So as a larger society, the truncating of Pluto is very different than an astrologer's understanding.
I believe that is the importance of the transmutation, that we see size as some element of grandeur, and it really isn't significant. Atoms are so tiny, they have huge spaces and yet powerful. And I think this entire idea of size somehow wants to be, because actually, and I agree, well, okay. As a dwarf planet, he is actually the leader of a whole tribe of them out there that have huge transmutations that involve a large, not just one transformation, but a whole lingering effect. But I'm glad that you're identifying the fact that mainstream thinking, which astrologers have as far out as we are, have very, and in fact, a lot of people don't go with evolutionary astrology. We are combating that also. Those outer planets, what do they mean? You come across that all the time. And I think in this whole business of networking, it is a matter of seeing the identity and truth of, without this judgment that we've been attaching through Capricorn, because we have to judge in Capricorn. We think we do.
As regards to like the size of planets and their meaning, they go on and on about this. How could Pluto be a planet when so small, so far out there? And yet, on our charts, we have points that are nothing. The nodes, the midheaven, the ascendant, they are not a physical thing, and yet they have tremendous power. So why wouldn't little tiny things that we discover in outer space, and we attach a myth to them, and then we put them in our charts and they work? So I don't know.
Sure.
The little things have a lot of things to say.
It's mind-boggling. And I'm really, again, Laura, very thankful that you brought this up and that you're willing to go, and kind of dissect this, because it brings forth to me too the encouragement through the charts to bring the spirituality into us. And really, I think this is leading into that path, because next year we'll have Saturn and Neptune conjunct, and that, according to like vibrational astrology, is all about spirituality, really deep, besides what we've thought about it as.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, my point was more Pluto unearthing things that are hidden and what we try to ignore. That was the point I was trying to make, Sue.
And it's a good one.
As a larger society outside of the astrology community, we try to ignore what's uncomfortable and death and transformation. And that this ingress will maybe force us to, as a culture, bring up stuff we can no longer truncate and hide away.
Thank you for
that. That was what I was trying to get at.
And you have beautifully. And I'm glad, and any apology or I stand corrected. I'm glad for all of this. This is strong. And actually,
currently happening right now is the Indian schools are all over Canada, the United States, and what they're finding is children's graves all over the place by the thousands, and we have to look at these things.
Yeah,
these dark chapters of American history are shoved away, and they start to hurt and they start to fester, and it's time to address them, I think, and look at them and say, wow, this is terrible.
Yeah.
And-
And we can't look at what we ignore, right? It's one of those things, even just in our own
Right?
lives.
It's
It's like as
hard
soon
to
as
look
you
at it.
become aware of something, you can't not address it. It's like, well, you could choose not to, but you can't not know about it once you know about it, right? Or I think about the imagery there. There's like the young woman and old woman in the same piece of art, right? The Reuben vase. It's like, well, once you've seen both images, you can't only see one. You can't go back to only seeing one once you've learned, once your your brain has figured out that there's two there. So yeah,
And
we can't be, stuff won't be able to be reburied once, right? So like with the Indian schools, right? That's like, once that's out, it can't be put, the genie can't be put back in the bottle.
There's so many other, speaking and reinforcing what you're both speaking about. I'm noticing in the chart all the energies that are in support of that. For instance, look at Venus in the first house there, conjunct our natal Eris. It's all about exclusivity and inclusivity. And then if we look in the fifth house, transiting Eris is conjunct our natal, well, in orb of the Chiron, that we just have this Chiron return, which, as we know, is a process. It's not just that one day on the 8th, but we're experiencing this whole, just as you're both commenting on, about looking at the deeper injustices of wounds of
And that's part of, I think, the reckoning that this country has to go through. That it's often said, oh, well, that slavery was the first sin of this country. I go further back and it's genocide. It's not that slavery was not horrific, but genocide was how this country was founded. And there's a need to have that, a reckoning around that. If stuff is going to shift in a positive direction, that you can only ignore stuff for so long. Right, so Pluto can bring that up.
Chiron and Eris speak to Chiron, the wound that never heals, so use it to heal others, and Eris, the messages of I will not be ignored anymore.
Mm-hmm.
She throws out her golden apple because she wasn't invited to the party. It's like, well, look at this, and that's what I think she's going to be doing with Chiron and Eris together. I think it's going to be very interesting because they're going to get closer, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just noticed here that the sun, of course, won't ingress for a couple of days. It was on the 21st, so it's at that very last degree of, or close to the end. Well, let's see, shall we, here, this is just a little information about Sedna. It is, as we mentioned, an enormous long orbit, although it's the shortest in Gemini. And this shows you an idea. There's a sun of just extreme path. And at 0 degrees Gemini, it is a glass bottom boat. I may have put some of these, the description of the boat in the prior one.
How perfect for a sea goddess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We were talking about that. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. And psychic of the wonder. It's amazing. A new dimension of reality. So there we go. Go on. Here we have a couple. We can spend a little time on this. You brought it up, John, and I think it's valuable. I put in because of the comparison, not to validate, but just to see maybe what some of the energies were, because Cleveland also had one term like Trump coming up. And I used, though, as the outer one when the Democrats conceded to Trump, which was early, according to the news, at 5:30 in the morning on the 6th. So that's what this particular chart is, because I want to keep it at the 0 point idea of the charts, because we have here Mars still at 0 degrees in Leo.
So this chart that you have says 1885, and he won his second term in 1993. So if we're going to compare second charts, that's okay. It still speaks to things. And I have some notes So
Okay.
Grover Cleveland, man, he was great. He was in Buffalo, and they're like, he hated politics. And they're like, we need a mayor. Will you run? He's like, I don't want to run. Well, run anyway. And he did. And he cleaned up that town. He got rid of all the corruption, and he did so well, they remembered him and he became the governor of New York. Did the same thing, cleaned up the state of New York. Election comes around. We need a Democrat to run who looks really good and has integrity. Well, they picked Grover Cleveland. He became president. So his first term, a lot of integrity. And then he actually won 3 elections in a row, but the Electoral College gave it to Benjamin Harrison. So he comes back. And we're in the middle of the Gilded Age. Does that sound familiar?
Mhm.
So that's one thing that rings the same. He started supporting the gold standard, which I think ultimately hurt him because everybody wanted to go silver. And then there was the Panic of 1893, which was a depression towards maybe early on in his second term, which kind of hurt his success as a president. But he always, I saw this thing about the best things about all the presidents, and with Grover Cleveland, it was his integrity. He vetoed
He
everything.
was liked.
And he was a great defender of the Constitution.
Yeah. Now, I noticed in a few that just shows some similarities, and I'm not judging one way or the other. These are just the facts. But the thing was, he did overcome a sex scandal to defeat the Republican, and that was in 1884, which was interesting. And he also, though...
And he owned up to it.
Well,
He
yeah.
had so much
Oh, and
integrity.
he
Like, yeah,
owned up. There
yeah.
you go.
He
Okay.
didn't.
So,
He didn't say that it happened. He didn't deny it. And they're like, well,
yeah.
that's
Good
kind of-
enough. Good enough. We're just
Right.
stating facts. And then also he focused on economic policy issues, including tariffs. And interestingly, that because of the Democratic Party didn't go well. And so he had based them about reducing tariffs. So that was interesting that tariffs in the economy, it was a success, was included. But on the second time around, and he was not sympathetic to workers' rights. He was, I think, supported by a lot of the rich people. But he kept the appeal across the board. People did like him. And so I'm not sure on the second one, I just grabbed some.
It would be March.
But, I know. Republicans had,
1893.
it turns out that in between them, that Republicans had enacted significant tariff increases during Harrison. And so Harrison attributed to the loss of that. And because of the economy, I think he won it the second time. He had a lot of benefactors pushing for that. And so that was the same theme as this one.
The president in between was a Gilded Age Republican, and he was not very popular, and he didn't connect with the people. So they thought bringing back Cleveland would be really good.
Yeah.
So there's the message of not connecting with the populace. So they bring in the previous president before, which is really interesting, I think.
Yeah, which is a
It is a
parallel.
swing.
And
Definitely, yeah.
And that economics being one of the driving issues, right?
Yes.
Of the
Sure.
haves
Yeah.
and have not
Yep, that's
Um,
right.
being, because during the Gilded Age, it was such a huge despair. The gap was just ginormous of the Rockefellers versus the average American.
Yeah. And pardon with some of these, sometimes these get quite complex, making all these slides, and I have a lot going. So obviously perfection is not my middle name sometimes, as much as I try to, obviously. And I mean, I hope it's obvious because, I go through a bit. But here, I just went through different slides, and I guess it's the same one that I did, but I did circle a few things. Let's go on to this.
I think
Let's
it's
finish
still
up in
20.
our last minute, if we can, about the whole picture. Okay, that's what's really got us, is that it's Gemini, Leo, Scorpio, Sag. It's right up there on the top, all of these in the bottom. And I think we can, shall we talk about that a little bit? Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. If you want to leave some of those
Laura?
slides up
Oh.
so that it's easier.
Yeah,
to,
I am. Mhm.
Well, even a circle, right? So that most of this, what's ingressing, is the top half of the chart, right? And so
There
if
it
we
is,
just
yeah.
think about that in a more sort of natal sense, right? Like it's this public presenting, public facing self that is really going through the biggest transformation, not as much
Yeah.
internal unconscious inner work, but what
Right.
public facing individually and collectively that is
It is.
really shifting and
Yeah,
changing costumes.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, the cultural, yes, the group. And we have about a minute. We can still, we put it on, but we have a few minutes that can get off stage. The hook hasn't come yet. And so, and that's Dr. Tad and John Chinworth and myself. Yes, as you can see, these ingresses with these really are, and energetically, some support as far as just feeding it, and others are like, oh, what's the action here? So there's so many dynamics. You know, you have, and ones that essentially are trying to work things out because they just don't see it the same. Well, thank you, Dr. Tad and John Chinworth. We'll have to return. We'll see what our sprouts breed and grow as.
Thank you for joining an insightful conversation on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests awaken consciousness by connecting soul growth patterns with astrology's energetic cycles. Be sure to tune in next Sunday, 1 p.m. Pacific Time, to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.